The month of Rajab has some very important dates in the history of the Islamic calendar. Some of its birth of the Imams, another one is, which is going to be tonight, is the wafat of Bibi Sayyeda Zaynab bin Ali alayhi salam. Bibi Zaynab had a very prominent role in the history of Islam. There are many prominent lessons that you can learn from the life of Bibi Zaynab alayhi salam. Now, although there are not many historical books on the Islamic side, on the Arabic side, or that much literature on the English side, however, whatever material is available, one can easily see that she is an excellent role model. And it's a role model not only for men, but also for women and men combined. Now, there are many lessons you can learn from her life, right? And those lessons are important not only in before times, they're actually more relevant even in today's times when we are looking for our communities, people, not only Muslims, right, but even external people are looking for, role models that exemplify leadership, resilience during trials and tribulations, patience, eloquence in their responses to those trials and tribulations, right? And then, if you go and ask, even in our Muslim community, if you go ask for, male role models, you will find that we will be provided with a lot of male role models. And those male role models are there for men, and also women are supposed to follow those role models. However, if you go ask them which are the women role models, you will be very pressed to even name a handful of women who are role models, and they will say those role models are for women only most of the time. But it's kind of sad and unfortunate that in that list we say that Zainab alayhi salam's name will not be in the list. So we will today try to see why and what principles Bibi Sayyeda alayhi salam represented, and how her role as a role model is not only something that can be used for women, but it's also a role model that can be used for men. When you look at the life of Sayyeda Zaynab alayhi salam, right, her lasting influence on Islam and her principles and her resilience during trials and tribulations and her responses to those trials and tribulations. And not only that, she actually provided not only social role model, but she actually provided a very active political role model in the history of Islam. If I look at today, if I talk to my children today, if there was a role model that I want to exemplify and have them follow, I would probably ask them to follow the role model of Bibi Zaynab alayhi salam. During last year's Ashura procession, and my daughter got the chance to actually, speak in the Ashura procession, and I introduced her to Bibi Zaynab alayhi salam. And what she did was she spoke about her life in her speech in the Ashura procession. But then, as I noticed during the entire year since then, whenever she is looking at examples to quote about leadership, especially on the women's side, she's actually, she's doing her college applications, and I'm noticing she's actually using Bibi Zainab's examples in her college essays. Whenever there is a talk about leadership or examples of where you can talk about which are your role models, she's actually quoting Bibi Zainab alayhi salam. So that just goes to show that, as Muslims, and even Shia, we have done a very bad job as far as explaining the role of Bibi Sayyeda Zaynab alayhi salam, right, and the principles she represents, and what her life, shows us in terms of both the political and social spectrum. There's a lot of people who I think today, if we go out and openly talk about Bibi Zainab's role, right from the day she was born till she was martyred, right? And if you look at her life history, you will see the examples are strewn all over the place where, when people are looking for role models, you can see how a woman who exemplifies the principles of Islam and also a leadership role in the political spectrum. So, what did Bibi Zaynab alayhi salam do? So that would be the question to ask, right? And I've kept talking about for the last 7-8 minutes, Bibi Zaynab alayhi salam's political role. So she showed tremendous patience, resilience during adversity, and bravery, and she was not afraid to speak out against injustice in spite of all the odds that were conspired against. So when you think somebody would be down and out in the situations that she was in, and a normal person would just give up hope, she actually rose up and showed leadership skills that we should all learn from. Now, if it wasn't for her actions on the 10th of Muharram, right, in Karbala, or what leadership she exhibited after the aftermath of Karbala, right, Islam would not have survived, or Islam, the way we know, in the form we know, would not have existed. Well, Muhammad wa Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Now, let's look at some of her life in terms of childhood and how we can learn some of the lessons from her. So of course we know, if somebody asks, tell me about Bibi Zaynab, right away our response is she's the granddaughter of our Prophet. And then they will say, well, now what next? They'll say she's the daughter of Imam Ali and Bibi Fatima Zahra alayhi salam. So when we talk about that, then she's the sister of Imam Hussain and Imam Hussain. So yeah, she was born in a very noble, and she had a very noble lineage, and she was born in a very noble family. But was that her only or the first identification feature, right? Or that's actually not true, right? She actually stood up on her own as a leader in her own right. So we will talk about that. Now, if you think about it, if she was born in such a royal, noble lineage family, her childhood would be actually very easy, right? Which actually is not the case, right? If you look at it, Imam Hassan was born in 3rd Hijri, Imam Hussain was born in 4th Hijri, and Bibi Zaynab was born in the 5th Hijri, right? So even though her first 6 years of her childhood were supposed to be very ideal, which it was because her mother was alive at that time, but at the very early age of 6, she actually lost her mother. Right? Bibi Fatima Zahra passed away, in the 10th Hijri, so she was barely 10 years old. Right? Now a lot of times, let's go back to her birth, her name a little bit, right? So when she was born, both Imam Ali and Bibi Fatima Zahra asked the Prophet to name her. The Prophet said, how can I name her when Allah Himself has chosen to name Bibi Zaynab's name? So at that time, Jibreel appeared and said, Allah has chosen to name the newborn baby girl Zainab. Now if you look at the meaning of Zainab, Zainab means a beautiful plant, or something very good to look at, or a plant that smells very good. That's one of the meanings of Zainab. But also another meaning of Zainab is called Zinat-e Abiha, the adornment of her father, somebody who would make her father very proud. Now, it just goes to show as Muslims, right, when we, especially when we come over from the east to the west, right, nowadays we actually are shy to name our kids names that are, that look completely Islamic. We try to find names that actually blend into the Western culture per se, right? Or we may, go to Google and try to find a name that actually is very non-Islamic or kind of, lenient along those lines. But as parents, right, we shouldn't get that inferiority complex of living in the West, where we shouldn't give our children beautiful names. There's people naming their kids XYZ nowadays. If you go look at that, that's also going on. So that just goes to show that parents are shirking their responsibility. Now, if you look at our imams, everyone is named Ali or Muhammad or Ali or Muhammad. If you look at the women, they're either named Fatima or Zainab. So it just goes to show that we as Muslims, right, we should make sure as parents, right, when we have children, we give them beautiful names, and names that actually signify what we stand for. Now, Bibi Zainab, her mother passed away at the age of 6. Now, a lot of times when a parent passes away this early, a lot of people give up hope. The world's ended. Why is Allah being mean to me, right? And those are the things that people a lot of times, when things go bad, there's a lesson learned for us too, right? Things go bad, we easily give up hope, or we start blaming Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now, Bibi Zainab, on the other hand, right, there are lessons that she learned from her mother up to the age of 6. The very first lesson she saw was that her mother was politically active. Bibi Fatima Zahra was politically active, and that example came right when she was 4 years old, and it was the case of Mubahir in the dispute with the Christians of Najran, right, where the ayah came that let us invoke the curse of Allah and let's bring your children, your women, and yourselves. Guess who came? Bibi Zahra stepped out of the home. A lot of places, what do we do today nowadays? Women cannot step out of the home. You cannot be politically active. Your role is to cook, clean, and take care of the house. Here you see Bibi Zahra stepping out of the house and becoming politically active in facing the Christians of Najran. Now, was that the only time Bibi Fatima stood up politically? No, right? What was the other example? When Imam Ali had the political and moral crisis after the passing away of Rasulullah, right? Bibi Fatima Zahra decided to speak up, right? And Bibi Zaynab was watching this even at the age of 6. She was watching Bibi Fatima, who was injured at that time, decided to step out of her home and speak out against injustice in an assembly of men and speaking out against the rulers of that time, right? And by the way, that was one of the most eloquent speeches using the Quran that Bibi Fatima represented when she talked about the injustice. So I'm going to kind of give you a little bit quote of what Bibi Fatima said, right? So she said that you are opposing us on the issue of qadr. So qadr was a property that was taken away, claiming that prophets cannot own any inheritance, so they cannot pass on any inheritance. And so hence they took the property away from Bibi Fatima. So she said, you are opposing us on the issue of qadr. But then who knows Quran better, you or us? Right? And then she says, if you are saying that prophets do not leave inheritance, then how come Dawood left Sulaiman inheritance? Wawarita Sulaiman Dawood. So the prophet Dawood, Sulaiman inherited prophet Dawood's inheritance. But she wasn't done right? Then she quoted the example of Zachariah, right? Who was a prophet who prayed to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give him an heir so he can inherit it. Who was that heir? That was Yahya or John the Baptist, as we know. So there was another example she quoted from the Quran. And then she recited this ayah from the Quran. She says, كُتِبَ عَلَيْكُمْ إِذَا حَضَرَ أَحَدَكُمُ الْمَوْتُ إِنْ تَرَكَ خَيْرَ الْوَصِيَّةُ لِلْوَالِدَيْنِ وَالْأَقْرَبِينَ بِالْمَعْرُوفِ. She said, prescribed for you when death approaches one of you, if he leaves wealth, then he should leave it for his near ones. So she said, I am the near one of Rasulullah. So if Allah is commanding somebody to do that, how would Rasulullah not do that? So this is the example that Bibi Zaynab is learning from Bibi Fatima Zahra Salamu alayha. Now, was that the only time, right, that, when you look at the life of Bibi Zaynab, right, you see she's speaking up in the court of Ibn Ziyad, and she's speaking out in the court of Yazid. What is she doing? She's quoting the Quran, right? When she's talking to them, she's quoting the Quran. So was that coincidence? No, this was the child learning from the mother. Now, how many times, when we look at our own community, right, and this is something that I always bring up as an issue, especially in our community, Asian community. One of the things I used to see, right from childhood, right, we emphasize our children to learn to read the Quran. Now the problem is that when Asian communities, when we talk about learn to read the Quran, we actually teach them to read it without understanding. We teach our children to learn to read the Quran without understanding. Right? It's unfortunate when you in Surah Jumu'ah, right? Allah says to the Yahud, He says, "Masalul lazina humilut Tawrat." Right? So you are carrying this burden, right, as on your back, like Torah. The Yahudis are carrying the Torah on their back as if it's a dead weight, like a donkey. So what's the purpose of actually teaching your kid just to learn to read the Quran without any understanding? Now here on the other example of Ahlul Bayt are showing that you use the Quran, you have to learn it with understanding. So Muhammad wa ala Muhammad sallallahu. Now this is the responsibility of the parents, right? And as us in our community, right? It's the responsibility of the parents to teach their children to not only learn to read the Quran, but learn to read it with understanding. If you don't do that, that you're doing a great disservice to your child. So this is the mother teaching the young daughter at the age of 6. Now she also watched her mother perform Salatul Layl. When she used to do dua, she used to do the dua for the neighbors first before she used to do the dua for themselves, right? Now, if you see the life of Bibi Zaynab in the aftermath of Karbala, there's tents burning, there's heads being beheaded, right? They are being pelted with stones and they are, whipped on the way, boiling water is being thrown on them, and guess what, she's doing? She's still praying Salatul Layl, right? So that just gives you the example. Now, when her mother passed away, right, was that, did she just go into a cocoon, or did she actually do something, right? Or did she say, Allah's taken away my mother, I don't want to do anything, I'm angry at Allah? No. Imam Ali took her under her wing, right? And Imam Ali used to sit and converse with her daughter about the concepts of Islam. This just goes to show when you have daughters as fathers, right, it's your responsibility to talk to your daughters, constantly talk to your daughters. And she learned from him, right? And then when she learned from him, what did she do? She said, let me just stop. No, she said, who wants to learn the Quran? Come to my home, I'll teach you the tafsir of the Quran. Then next day she says, if you want to learn the tajweed, so how to actually recite the Quran. Then the next day she would actually teach them about the concepts of Tawheed and Nabuwa and Imama, right? Then on the next day she would teach them about, principles of Sharia, how to pray, how to do Hajj, how to do Zakat. So she not only learned from her mother, but she actually started training the community. A lot of time, if you say this community killed my mother, or was the cause of her death, right? And they are all hypocrites, so I don't want to participate or help in this community, right? Instead, what she decided to do, whatever knowledge and lessons she learned from her mother and her father, she started teaching that. So she became socially active, also teaching it. Now, she was married to Abdullah ibn Jafar, who was, her uncle's son, right? And think of this way, a lot of times, when our women are actually doing activities where they're learning, teaching, or doing something, what do the men do typically? Why are you doing this? You should focus on your home, should cook, you should clean, don't go learn something, right? Don't go at the mosque and do social work, right? Don't volunteer, But did Abdullah bin Jafar say anything? No, he in fact actually encouraged her. Right? And there's a balance, of course, that you need to maintain between your home and your external life. But she was doing these things. She wasn't sitting in the cocoon inside her home. Now, her significant role actually came from the instance of Karbala. So before that, I want to take a break and Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. وَلَسَّرِ إِنَّ الْإِنسَانَ لَفِي خُسْرٍ إِلَّا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ وَتَوَاصَوْا بِالْحَقِّ وَتَوَاصَوْا بِالصَّبْرِ إِنَّ اللَّهَ وَمَلَائِكَتَهُ يُصَلُّونَ عَلَى النَّبِيِّ يَا أَيُّهَا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا صَلُّوا عَلَيْهِ وَسَلِّمُوا تَسْلِيمًا. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Walhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wassalatu wassalamu ala Sayyidina wa Nabiyyina Abul Qasim Mustafa Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Wa alihi al-tayyibin al-atharin al-muttajabin al-hudat al-mahdin al-ma'sumin. Wa salli ala Ali Amir al-Mu'minin wa Siddiq al-Tahira Fatimah al-Zahra Sayyidati Nisa al-Alamin. والحسن والحسين سيد شباب أهل الجنة وعلي بن الحسين ومحمد بن علي وجعفر بن محمد وموسى بن جعفر وعلي بن موسى ومحمد بن طريق وعلي بن محمد والحسن بن علي والخلف القائم المهدي صلواتك عليهم أجمعين. صل على أئمة المسلمين وحماة المستضعفين وهداة المؤمنين محمد وآل محمد صلوات. So, was that the only instance of her being socially active? Now, let's talk a little bit about how she got involved politically, right? Now, she had a very important role to play in the tragedy of Karbala and the aftermath of Karbala, right? But, was that the only time? No. She actually, when Imam Ali became Khalifa, she actually moved with him to Kufa. So Imam Ali was teaching in his mosque, right, in Masjid al-Kufa. She was teaching people in her home. And she had the choice actually to go to Karbala, right? Because her husband actually stayed behind. And Imam Hussain offered her that you don't have to accompany. She says, no, I have to accompany. And then when it came down to the time of where she was watching the martyrdom of the family members, right? She walked up to Imam Hussain and said, I would be honored to offer my 2 sons for martyrdom, right? And Imam Hussain actually refused. He says, no, I can't do that. But she says, when I face Bibi Fatima, when I face my mother, right, what face am I going to show her, right? So she actually watched her 2 sons, martyred before her. Now she has a very important role in Karbala. If you look at her, right, she's always doing something. Anytime we hear the Messiah, we hear about 10th of Muharram, we're always seeing Bibi Zaynab in the picture. You see Imam Hussain constantly talking to her. You see Bibi Zaynab always consoling the women. She's always seeing, when the women are losing their husbands, their brothers, their children, she's always consoling the women. She's also seen helping Imam Sajjad and the women and the children when the tents are burning, right, after the aftermath of Karbala, right? She's the one who's witnessing the heads being cut off, her own sons, her brothers, right, her family members, her nephews. She's seen even 6-month-old Aliyah, so she's watching the heads being loaded on spears. And guess what she's doing? These men wanted to load the women on the saddles, and she says, no, you won't do it, I will do it. Now you have to ask the question that if she's helping load all these women, who's helping her get all the stuff? You have to ask that question, right? And she's the one protecting the women and the children on the way from Kufa. They went from Karbala to Kufa and then all the way to Damascus, right? They were getting whipped as they were going down. This was not just a quick 2-hour plane ride. They were getting whipped on the way. They were pelted with stones. They were getting poked with spears. Right? They were getting insults hurled at them. They were getting boiling water being thrown on the family of Rasulullah. Yet, what did she do? She stayed patient and resilient in all of these instances. Right? You can see that in her speeches, right? When you hear her speeches, right? You can see that. You can not only see that, but you can also see her not missing Salatul Layl. She's always quoting the Quran when she's talking in her speeches. So, just like her mother talked to her, right? Couple of important speeches or sermons that she gave. I'll see if I can do justice to the time. But she delivered 2 important speeches, right? One was in the court of Ibn Ziyad in Kufa, and then another one was in the court of Damascus. And these, if you had nothing else to show about Bibi Zaynab, you could just show these speeches, right? And they would show you what type of exemplary character and personality and honor and dignity that she had, right? Her words resonated the truth and righteousness, right? Which left a lasting impact on us, especially as the Shia, right? She played a very crucial role in protecting Islam, protecting the Imams, protecting the family of Rasulullah. Now, if you look at it, when she was in the court of Ibn Ziyad used to play with the head of Imam Hussain, right? He used to touch his lips and teeth, right? So, and then he turned around and he asked Bibi Zaynab. His goal was to morally demoralize her, right? You have all these heads cut off. You are here as prisoners in front of us, right? And I'm going to give you an insult on top of it, right? Just to put your spirits down. So what does he say? He says, and this is just one, he says, how did you like Allah's treatment of your family? So he's ridiculing you. He says, Allah caused the death of your family, right? So he says, how do you like Allah's treatment of your family? She turned around and she says, what you did is of your own freedom. What you did is with your own freedom. However, was son of Marjan, right? That was his father's name. She says, Ma araitu illa jamila. I see nothing but beauty in the martyrdom of my brother. It just goes to show how elegant. Now what is, and then she continues, she says, God destined martyrdom for my brothers and his devotees. And they have all left for the heavenly abode. And you are left to be interrogated. God will call us and you people, and he will give his judgment. Now why did she say, I see nothing but beauty? If you look at it, Imam Hussain acted with dignity and honor every step of the way. When they wanted water, he gave them water. Right? When they killed his child in his arms, he was still nice and gentle to them. He was always extolling them to follow the truth and come to the right part. He kept inviting them to the right part. So this is like the example when she's saying, like, you seeing something else, I see nothing but beauty. Ma alaytu illa jamil. Now, there's another speech, right, that she gave in the Yazid's court. Now, Yazid actually was using a stick to touch the eyes and the lips of Imam Hussain alayhi salam, and then he quoted a poetry. I'm not going to quote the whole poetry, but I'll just give you a little bit of what he said, right? So just gives you an example of the amount of insult, or they're trying to show the family of Rasulullah down, and you can see how, if somebody like us would be there in that situation, we would be down and out. She actually chose to rise up like a phoenix from the ashes and deliver one of the most important sermons in the history of Islam, right? So he says, I wish those, so this is basically Yazid saying this, right? He's got all these prisoners in court in front of the family of Rasulullah, Imam Zainab and Bibi Zaynab in front of him, and he's talking, he's saying, I wish those of my ancestors who were killed at Badr were present today. He said, I wish my ancestors who were killed in Badr were present. Now, who was his ancestors? His ancestors was Utbah ibn Rabi'a, his grandfather, right? His uncle, right, and his other uncle too, right? Shayba ibn Rabi'a, he had Al-Walid, but who else was present? Abu Sufyan, right? And then he continued, he says, and then those who had seen the Khazraj clan wailing in the battle of Uhud. Who was there in the battle of Uhud? Abu Sufyan. Hind, his mother, who actually chewed the liver of, she hired a black slave to hurl a spear on Hazrat Hamza alayhi salam, and that caused his martyrdom. But after the war, she came, found his body, and she cut open his liver and she chewed his raw liver. Right? And then he says, after he says that my ancestors would be proud of me, he says, they would have hailed me with loud cries, they would be proud of me. And they would say that I did so to revenge for Badr, and now that revenge has been completed. So now this is the insult he's hurling to her, right? And look at some of the replies. Now I'm not giving you exactly quote, I'm just giving you some excerpts of her speech, right? Look at what she replies. She says, all praise is due to Allah, Master of the world, and peace be upon the Messenger. And she goes, O Yazid, I'm just reading. O Yazid, son of the freed. Why is he son of the freed? Because when Rasulullah captured Makkah, Muawiyah was there in Makkah, and then Rasulullah freed him. So he's son of the freed. She says, O Yazid, son of the freed, you think you have achieved a great triumph, that you have humiliated the progeny of Muhammad and extinguished the light of Allah from the earth. But know that our affair is not confined to this transient world, and the consequences of our tragedy will reverberate throughout history. Subhanallah. See the response she's giving. Right? And then she continues, right? This is another passage from her speech, right? She goes, what do you gain by shedding the blood of the innocent? Have you not read the Quran? So again, Quran. See, Quran every time. Every time she's speaking, she's quoting the Quran. She goes, where Allah says, so she says, have you not read the Quran where Allah says, and never think of those who have been killed in the cause of Allah as dead. Rather, they are alive with their Lord, receiving provision. Our martyrs are alive, and their sacrifice has illuminated the path of truth. Right? You can see she's quoting the Quran again. It goes back to the Quran. And then she continues, she says, we are the family of the prophethood, the source of divine knowledge and the bearers of message of justice and righteousness. O Yazid, we are the heirs of patience, endurance, and unwavering faith. Now I want to turn around and ask Yazid a question myself too. He said, and the question is, O Yazid, right? Do you think that you can erase the memory of Imam Hussain alayhi salam, right? And his companions from the heart of the believers? I wish he could come 1400 years now and he can look at it, right? And then my answer would be no. The story of Karbala will be narrated in every corner of the world. You can look at now, you can see that, right? That Imam Hussain and his sacrifices reverberating in the entire world, right? And people will rise and continue to rise against oppression inspired by the sacrifice of Imam Hussain. Subhanallah. And this is all why? Because Bibi Zainab, right? She was the main instigator to be, she was the main person who spread the message of Imam Hussain after his murder. Then she continued, right? She goes, "Oh Yazid, do as you please. But remember, Allah is the ultimate judge, and the day of judgment will be the day of true justice. On that day, every tyrant will be brought to account, and every oppressed soul will find justice." Now I want to ask us believers, right, the ones who weep for the tragedy of Karbala, right, let your, tears be the seeds of resistance, right? Remember the sacrifice of Imam Hussain alayhi salam. Because in his martyrdom lies the victory of truth over falsehood. Right? And our allegiance is to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and we submit to His will. Right? And the saga of Karbala will live on forever till the day of judgment, because when Allah replaced the sacrifice of Ibrahim, He said, "I'm replacing it with a great sacrifice." Right? What is this great sacrifice? It was the sacrifice of Imam Hussain. Right? And O Yazid, the legacy of Imam Hussain, Bibi Zaynab, and the martyrs of Karbala will endure, and his stand against oppression will inspire generations to come. Now, Bibi Zaynab, when she returned to Medina, right, she was the one who actually started the tradition of majalis and mourning for Imam Hussain alayhi salam. She was the one who started it. And it became so loud, right, for them, and so much problem for them that they actually banished her from Medina. Now we have two stories. One is saying she actually went to Egypt, and another one is she went back to Cairo, where her place of martyrdom is, right? May Allah give us the chance to visit that holy shrine, and we can continue looking at her role, right, in preserving the memory of the sacrifices made by her family, right? Bibi Zainab's life is a testament of resilience, faith, and unwavering commitment to justice, right? And her legacy continues to inspire millions of people 1400 years ago, and will continue to inspire millions of Muslims till the day of judgment, right? So may Allah give us the strength to stand up against injustice wherever it may be found. Oh Allah, grant us the good deeds that give us paradise and nearness to the Aimma alayhi salam, and then grant us the strength to stay away from whatever bad things are out there, and give us the protection against this, so we can be saved from the fire of Jahannam, right? Subhana rabbika rabbil izzati amma yasifun, wa salamun alal mursalin, walhamdulillahi rabbil alamin. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. Qul huwallahu ahad, Allahus samad, lam yalid wa lam yulad wa lam yakul lahu kufuwan ahad. Allahumma ighfir lil mu'minina wal mu'minat wal muslimina wal muslimat wal amwat. تابع بيننا بينهم بالخيرات إنك مجيب الدعوات إنك على كل شيء قدير. الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما.